amazing wisdom,
entrepreneurs,
business leaders,
success,
CEOs,
amazing success
around the world.
This is the Success Nuggets Podcast. Have you ever wondered what you could learn and how inspired you'd be if you asked incredible people from around the world about the patterns that drive progress? Get ready to dive into a world of insights and inspiration. This is the Success Nuggets Podcast with the founder of the Digital Light Bulb and your host, David Abel.
Today's guest is a three-time Olympian who inspired a cult Hollywood movie. This is the Success Nuggets Podcast, and thanks for joining us.
Record at your own peril.
Who, what, where inspired Devon to become a runner?
Where do I start? I start with my discovery of sports. So I grew up, interestingly enough, in a place in Kingston called Olympic Gardens. Someone would hear that name and think of Jamaica and think of a nice suburban place, maybe a community person, side of a hill, being swept by breezes of the Caribbean Sea. But Olympic Gardens was a really tough, gritty, ghetto environment. But at primary school, elementary school, I discovered football and in the process, sports in general, And what I realized about sports was what your family's net worth didn't matter what the connections you had, the advantages you have in life. None of that mattered on the soccer pitch. Forget about skill. It's more heart. What heart, what drive, what determination could you bring to that activity in that moment? So I fell in love with that. I fell in love with the competition of it. And I guess it didn't hurt that I had some skills and skills can be relative as well. I eventually got the name Pele. They nicknamed me after the Brazilian great. And I fancied myself a sprinter at the time. In primary school, I went to high school where the competition was even more fierce. And I'm not winning crap, man. Third, fourth. I was not impressed with that at all. And then I discovered actually my second year of high school, they were giving out medals, and I've never won a medal before. And I'm like, oh my God, I would do anything to win a medal. And I went out and ran the 800 meters, and I won. And I won my first medal, and I got hooked on that, and I wanted to join the track team. So a couple other things were happening too then. Perhaps the most impactful one is that it was 1979 now we're talking about, and ABC Wide World of Sports had a series on TV called Road to Moscow. It was the year before the Moscow Olympics in 1980. And in it, they highlighted athletes from around the world, different disciplines and, of course, nationalities and ethnicities and so on. And you know how when you think of Olympic athletes, you think of these superhuman beings. And what I saw in that series, the thing that stands out to me was how average and ordinary they were. They were just like you and I, man, just ordinary people dealing with a whole bunch of challenges in their personal lives and, of course, in their sporting lives as well. And it kind of dawned on me that, wow, practically anybody could become an Olympian if they had this extraordinary dream, but also an equally extraordinary desire to work and make those dreams a reality. And that's kind of where the idea of me becoming an Olympic athlete and running at a high level was birthed in that moment. And so I started dreaming about competing in the 1984 Olympic Games in LA as an 800 and 1500 meter runner, because that was not my new love now. And I had Sebastian Coe, Steve Ovett, Steve Cram, they were the rage at the time. And I would be glued not to YouTube, because it was but I was glued to the sports news just to see what they were doing. And needless to say, I didn't come anywhere near qualifying for the 1984 Olympics. I guess my primary dream of becoming an army officer, I went to pursue that. And after becoming an army officer, I decided I would go back to trying to compete in the 88 Olympics and so. So I started running again, and the running turned into bobsledding instead.
Yeah. Where did the idea of the bobsleigh come from?
Yeah. Two Americans who lived in Jamaica, George Fitch and William Maloney, their stories that they were in a local bar, chit-chatting. And they were discussing this popular belief in Jamaica that Jamaican women and athletes were the best in the world. And there was no way for them to test the former without getting in trouble with their wives. So they decided to put the latter to the test. And according to George, I remember him saying this many times, that the way you test how good an athlete is to see how well he or she can adapt to a new sport. And they saw we had pushcart derby, two crazy guys going down the side of a hill in a cart, except for the ice. It looks like bobsledding. You need sprinters, you need speed for the start. Jamaica has lots of sprinters, but the guys on the summer team didn't want to do it. So they came to the army looking for athletes. And as it turned out, this is around about the time now that I've started running again, dreaming that maybe somehow I could qualify for the 1988 Olympic Games in Seoul, Korea. And I go run this cross-country race, and I finished 14 from 40, which was a surprise to many people, because when I was at Sandhurst, I jumped from a plane. And I always say, don't judge me. I was young and foolish. All right, cool. But I jumped from a plane and I broke my ankle.
Okay, with a parachute, right? Okay.
Yeah, that's the part. I'm not that foolish. Oh
Yeah.
my God.
Okay.
No. Yeah, I parachuted and I broke my ankle in Nether River in the second jump. So when I got back to Jamaica, I was limping still. I was still not fully recovered. I was not the picture of an athlete. And, I'm in the Jamaica Defense Force. If you're a Sandhurst trained officer, you're generally not viewed as physical or rugged and tough, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're a gentleman. You're an English gentleman. You went to Sandhurst kind of stuff, that,
Yep.
you know how stereotypes are totally inaccurate. But clearly I'm playing up to the stereotype because I'm a Sandhurst trained officer who's limping around barracks. But I'm running now. I'm running, and I'm trying to get fit. And I go run this race and I finish 14 from 40. And they're like, oh, he's fit.
Mm.
And so the bobsled idea is swirling around the barracks. And my colonel told me that I should go to the team trials. I didn't volunteer. And it's not because he thought I was this amazing athlete, but because of a philosophy in the army that says officers must always participate. And he had a bunch of enlisted men going to the team trials. Mm-hmm. So I thought he'd send his young fit officer to the team trials as well. Well, here's the thing. The way I am wired, I'm not the guy to just participate. I can't be an also run guy. So no, it goes from, to be honest, not interested in this bobsled idea because I thought it was really absurd and ridiculous, to I'm going. So now, how do I make this team? It's like, oh my, I have no idea who I'm going to make this team. I was what I would call army fit. I could walk 100 miles with 50 pounds on my back and a rifle in my hand. But I didn't think I was sports fit, especially as I'm thinking about the level of fitness you need to be at to compete in the Olympic Games. Mm. But man, I went to the team trials. I just tried my darnest, man. I tried so hard. And I guess they liked my smile too. So they selected me. Yeah.
Oh, well, that's superb. But it wasn't quite over then, because you get selected. The Jamaican bobsleigh team, it's a brand new thing. And as far as I know, there was funding issues for quite a long time where other people may have had to have, look after families or earn money or go back to work. In this situation here with the funding, did it ever look like it was not going to happen?
Yeah, well, it's kind of interesting because as difficult as I thought it was going to be to make the team, it was, that was the easiest part. Making a team was the easiest part, first of all, just learning the sport. If you're thinking that our team got selected in September of 1987 and the Olympics were in February of 88. And we had never, ever seen a bobsledding in our lives, a bobsled in our lives, or bobsleigh, I'm speaking to a British audience, in our lives, So just taking on that steep learning curve was incredible. And then, yes, not having any funding, it's really unnerving. And that's kind of one of the threads throughout my 3 Olympic experiences in bobsleigh. Always training but never knowing if you'll have the funding to continue. Like, you're kind of you're going day to day here, and knowing that you have to do everything that you can today to prepare, although with the hopes that you'll have the funding, but never knowing that you'll have the funding, but cannot wait. And that's a life lesson, right? You can't sit around waiting for things to fall in place before you get started. Kind of have to go with blind faith. And so I can remember being in Calgary. This is 1987, and an incredibly cold day, a really hard day of work, training. And all I could afford for dinner was one chicken leg, a roll, and a small soda. I'm 21 years old, man. But that's what we had. And being over in Europe afterwards and kind of starving and freezing, but keeping your eyes on the prize that the Olympics were coming up, but also then trying to figure out what can we do? And that's how we came up with the idea to start selling T-shirts, and we'd have a bag of shirts under our arm. We're going to a club and dance up beside a couple and go, "Hey man, you want to buy a shirt?" And the guy would say no, but the girl said yes, and he ends up paying, and we got dinner. So you just found a way to, I like to describe it as putting one foot in front of the other.
Brilliant. Yeah, one step at a time. With pure belief, you did that as well. Quite extraordinary. With this whole lily pad, the effect of all this career and it's sort of finished, how did you transform into leadership?
That's a really good question. How do I try? So I would say what they told me at Sandhurst, blame them, is that leaders aren't made, they are born. And it was kind of one of those things I was worried about even in high school. And I knew I wanted to be an army officer. I didn't know that I was a strong leader, And what I've come to realize is that, I was, even in high school. Quick backstory. At the end of high school, they're giving out an award for the most outstanding and all-around student. And at the time, I was the deputy head boy. I think the British audience would understand this. My friend was a head boy. And I beat him out for this top award. And a teacher confided in me and said that I think the differentiator was that the staff had judged me to be a better leader, more empathetic, more diplomatic. My friend was stern and draconian, and then coming back and serving where you're practicing it. And, kind of realizing, to be honest, from a strictly leadership standpoint, in other words, leading people under your charge, there are no magic formulas per se, in my opinion and in my style. It's really, if I could break it down to one sentence, is treating people as you like to be treated. And what do I mean by that? It's like, treat them as whole human beings as opposed to instruments of production. That means being empathetic. And how does empathy, like when you think of the military, you think of hard charging and almost a disassociation from the people and just being focused on the task. And there's that aspect of military life for sure, but in the end, it's the people who has to perform the mission and accomplish the mission. And you have to connect with them on a personal level. I pride myself in that, and then on the team as an athlete and a team captain, it's the same principles. And so you go from that, David, to, going from the army and bobsledding for 2 Olympics and then into the civilian world and then bobsledding to what I'm doing now as a speaker and trying to inspire and influence people from the stage. I kind of see those similarities as well.
I mean, everything, emotional intelligence, positivity. I think the employees are starting to demand it now. When you're on the stage, what are the key messages that you share as a motivational speaker?
My philosophy is to keep on pushing. And it has a number of facets to it. One is this idea that, look, we're always growing, man. We live in a world that's constantly changing rapidly, right? That's a one constant. And so in order to keep up and not, quite frankly, not just survive, but thrive, you have to grow. But that growth is kind of the natural order of things. But for you to be truly successful and thrive, it has to be intentional. So each of us have to be intentional in this very dynamic, ever-changing, fluid environment. And the growth and the idea of keep on pushing is dynamic, the very dynamic process as well, through which we are transforming ourselves. But also to recognize that that process of growth, the desire to achieve new goals, will meet on some obstacles. And so you have to find a way to push through those as well.
It's a brighter world on the other side. What do you think it means to be a global citizen in today's age?
When I'm asked that question, I usually I interpret your question to mean, like what's the one thing you'd want to see different and in the world, and it's that we become our brother's keeper. And I know with my army background and being a soldier at heart, my desire to be a brother's keeper could seem in conflict with this idea of being a soldier. And I don't necessarily see that conflict, because I feel that a soldier is a protector, someone who wants to make sure that the weaker, less fortunate ones among us are able to feel safe. I think if we could, I know we don't live in Pollyanna, but if more of us could start to see ourselves as our brother's keepers, we would have less conflicts, and certainly less intense conflicts at every level, at the level of nations, but also in our neighborhoods, our businesses, and our families as well.
Right on. It's a real short show, Devon. And it's been a real honor having you on. We've ran through that one. If you could, just before we go, do you have a one golden nugget to share?
Yes, my one golden nugget would be, there's never a perfect time to go after your goals. Sure, there's something to be said about, making your plans and doing your research and trying to get everything in order. But what I know is that if you sit around waiting for the perfect time, that's all you'll be doing, sitting around. So you have to start from where you are with what you have. What I know from experience is that when you do so, though, you start to get more knowledge and become wiser. You start to accumulate the resources, the support that you need, that will eventually take you to where you want to go.
Thanks for coming on today.
Yeah, man, David, thank you so much for having me as well.
Join David and his incredible guests next time on the Success Nuggets podcast. And to find out more, visit onegoldennugget.com. Thank you for listening.